Hi, everybody. Thursday night in Ottawa here, where we just saw the last little bit of snow. We had snow last night and the night before, not very much, but it's getting better. So we get a little warmer weather. Hope it's all warm weather for you guys out there too. And I hope everybody's doing well. Keep safe. I have a few questions, and thanks very much for people who are sending questions in, because we're getting close to May the 1st, and it will be seminar day. And if we could have even more questions in North America, by the way, but if we could have even more questions, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. This is some questions from Sonia, and they're linked up. They're always strangely, there are people who ask very similar questions. So I'm going to overlap between Laurie Delaplante and Sonia Nigam a little bit, and hopefully that will make some sense. Sonia starts off by saying, I woke up remembering parts of a dream, a bucket of yellow peaches and milk, being hit by a car and spilling onto the black pavement at night, and then rolling towards a telephone pole. Interesting dream. All dreams are interesting. Second dream, being in a woman's kitchen in the UK. It is a small kitchen, and she was preparing an appetizer and poured golden olive oil into a small glass vial to serve with bread. Then she smelled it and poured it out because it was rancid. Rancid means it's old, right? Too old, not as palatable as it would have been had it been not old. So my question is, she says, where do these images come from? I've never experienced them, so they cannot come from memory. And then I wonder if dreams are not part of experience. Can dreams have an impact upon identity or the personality structure, or is something else happening in these dreams that I should be paying attention to? Something to do with liquid and the color yellow and movement. I have a particular way of looking at dreams, and others have particular ways of looking at dreams. Not all dreams follow a very, let's say, particular way of engaging. Often dreams have seemingly negative things in them, and they're not at all. It's very interesting. Some emotional dreams often are, let's say, have a tendency to reverse. If you're uptight, for example, in a dream, maybe you could try to reverse that dream somehow, because remember, you are a personality. From my perspective, remember, you're a personality, and your relationship with being that personality has a lot to do with how you function internally and externally. One could say consciously and unconsciously, in the world and in yourself when you're in the world, but engaging with yourself. I look at dreams as from a positive perspective. And sometimes dreams or influences or frequencies, whatever you want to call them, will present images to you that are mystifying at the very least, because basically, we're often too close to ourselves. So they're often interpreted with respect to um, how you feel at a particular time when you're looking at a dream, or how you respond to a dream emotionally, physically, mentally, uh, when you're having it. In other words, if you have what you might call a nightmare, it may be only to wake you up to the point where additional aspects of the dream can be given to you. And from there on in, likely metaphorical. And this makes dreams very difficult to understand from the personality point of view. So, where to start? I'm not so sure that Sonia wants me to interpret, but let's say I say, okay, here are some aspects. Maybe we can take a look at the dream, just so that you can see that there's a positive perspective here. Because she said, black pavement at night rolling towards the telephone pole, this kind of thing. The car often relates to engagement with the personality. Maybe not sometimes, but often is. The night, and let me repeat that dream so that you can follow it a little easier. A bucket of yellow peaches and milk. So a bucket is containment. Contained in that, yellow peaches and milk. Well, how are you going to make some sense out of that? Well, maybe. There is, if you've had peaches, you know that they're soft and pliable. And you could take a look at that as constructive. Personality is reasonably compliable. And milk, flexible. There's an interest in that which might be able to broaden one, maybe. It's your dream, so you can try to broaden out the context of the dream to make it as positive as possible. Try that influence first. Then this spillage or movement is moving in a direction towards a telephone pole. A telephone pole is a stable idea or a construct that relates to linking communication, I would say, between one state and another, or various numbers of states. So I would look at that dream if I had it personally, and it implies that it's trying to reassure the person who had the dream, if it were mine, that there might be a nervousness about growing. Black asphalt at night. Ooh, can't get blacker than that, I guess. But it can be also in dealing with that aspect which is unknown. So the unknown would be an unconscious engagement either with the personality or a relationship with that which is not yet communicated with. And that allows a person to consider the possibility that in this dream, the dream is about a reassurance that there is an engagement, a movement towards communicating with another state somehow. And I would take that as a constructive thing. In the appetizer dream, being in a woman's kitchen in the UK, United Kingdom, linking up with the higher state, uniting that link. It is a small kitchen. It's a kitchen related to the personal. She was preparing an appetizer. And appetizers are precursors to an engagement with whatever is contained. An appetizer, what is contained is our personality orientations. They're contained in relationship to the unconscious and the conscious, and how we see the world and would explain the world from a perspective. And an appetizer and poured golden olive oil into a small glass, a small vial. Well, you try to make sense of something, your life, all of our lives. We try to do that in some way that we can interpret and understand relative to what we believe we already know. It's a small vial. It's not universal. So in this, I would say, to serve with bread, with something we can take in, in the old traditions, bread was information that would be sustaining in the old, the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, a graceful engagement with the higher state that will be sustaining. And she smelled it, personalized, and it smelled rancid. Rancid only means it's past its stale date. So once again, it's reassuring you that an aspect of engaging will be broadened past its stale date. And it's, again, there's flexibility, it's oil, it's movement. And the issue here in those two dreams is reassuring. If they were mine, I would say they were reassuring dreams related to a continued movement towards communication with, let's say, a different or altered or a broader perspective relating to states of consciousness within. We all have our personality orientations and we interpret. It's like you're handed a book and you ferret out that this must be in Romanian. Well, you don't really know, but your interpretation is that it's in Romanian. And it's really fine. It's great because you know that might be true. But then you find out it's Hungarian. Oh, it's not that far away from each other, except they're not exactly the same language. In our relationship with understanding and our search for meaning deep down inside, that search comes up with an idea or ideal, some version of what must, for us in that moment, be as true as we can make it, possibly. But there's a little bit of a movement there. We're always in a movement towards broadening out how we allow ourselves to see things, if it is within our willingness to do so. That is, for all of us, an aspect of our will to do so is our vulnerability. Are we willing to allow ourselves to move beyond what we've already reassured ourselves as the only way to see things, one could say? The answer would be yes, and the answer would be no. Depends on the context, depends on the moment, and depends on whether our emotions are in sync with our attempts to engage, and our hopes, one could say as well, to engage with other states that are fusing with us. And one level will fuse with another, but there has to be a synthesis, not necessarily related only to the personality's view of things, or what they need to one needs to view in a particular way. So it reassures the personality, although that's really how we grow. That reassurance is, we reassure ourselves until we can let ourselves be a little bit more flexible and move a bit and not be disturbed by the act of that movement. And this is not as easy as it sounds by using words in specific ways to enable others to understand you. It's more in a relationship with what goes on inside, in our minds, in our emotions, and in our reflexes, physical reflexes that relate directly to how we correspond to the value we placed on our way of seeing things. And if you can allow, as Sonia seems to have done, a little bit of questioning to occur with how one sees things, then you feel a little vulnerable when you're talking to others about how you can interpret the life structure that you're involved with during the movements that interact with higher states. There has to be enough personality engagement to hold back just a little bit and try to understand what's really going on inside. And that you could call will, but it's not kind of a personalized will. It's like a reassurance will. Maybe later I'll understand this better. If it were, for example, a dream that related to somebody else, not Sonia, then that dream would change, the images would change. If you've ever eaten Sonia's food or Mom's food, you can really understand why such a beautiful way of engaging in a snippet or a dream would be presented that way. Because the food is delightful, speaking for myself. And food in a larger context, in ancient times, was always considered something that was given beyond what you normally had, because times were always fairly reasonably tough. And food was precious, as is life being precious, and how we feed ourselves with how we function and relate to engaging with others and relate to allowing ourselves to be a part of an internal growth. And it's very private. It becomes exceedingly private. In other words, you relate to these things in a kind of privacy that allows you to actually engage with you and wonder and be curious about the place where you are. And as soon as you do that, there is a humility that begins to occur in you. And in that humble engagement, you are inquiring into another state, because you're allowing yourself to consider the possibility that you are not perfect in understanding how you function, how you engage with life. And you see also that you try to address that way of engaging to the best of your ability based on the echoes of the past and how you deal with the present. And that is very soul-searching, you could say, meaning it has a deeper engagement with you than going out for a walk Although while you're walking, you can do some penetrative thought, perhaps, or become more curious about things that might be quite inspiring to you because of the very act of engaging with movement is in alignment with movement within, physically, emotionally, mentally. There's a vulnerability there with that emotional dispositional stuff. But in our world, we begin to notice there are many emotions and there are many levels of how to engage with those emotions. And this is a deep interaction with taking a look at, let's say, habitual responses and considering them valuable because they give a hint to how you are inside. There's from Laurie says, Sri Aurobindo says that we are always living and acting on other planes of consciousness, typically without our awareness. I would personally agree with that. It just makes sense to me. Are these unfamiliar images, those images, snippets of dreams, reflective of intrusions from other planes of consciousness, for planes of consciousness, for the purpose of interfering with our growth? It's a question. It's not by Sri Aurobindo, it's by Laurie. If so, are we attracting these vibrations from other planes because of our personality's fear of growth, or is something else going on? Yeah, no, maybe it's possible. But the real question here is, are we always living and acting in other planes of consciousness? Our dilemma with this question is our awareness. That doesn't mean anything about being able or unable. The inquiry into an awareness of self in our world has a very impressive negative orientation. It's not, from my perspective, how you might help yourself. Another perspective, then, one way of looking at it, another way of looking at it, is to look at it like you don't always know how you function, because your awareness is really focused on a presentation of a personality form that relies primarily on its habitual background. And it relies on it for a very important purpose: survival. Not only survival, but to maintain a structural image within that allows you to understand little by little more about how a person functions on these planes. One might say about another person, I never do that. But you may do that with a softer intensity. But the result is that you are doing the same thing to another person that other person might do to someone else. But the intensity is not there, and you will miss it. Okay, Ron, but just a minute, that sounds pretty negative to me. Well, if you look at it from a different point of view, look at it from the point of view that you didn't know that was true before. And perhaps you could learn how to soften down, or just notice that you do these things from time to time, and it's a part of the way human beings act with each other. Well, that's an interesting statement. Is there then, do you have to go to negativity right away and say, well, yeah, but I shouldn't be doing that. I should do this. If you do this, you will put you down. Not someone else putting you down. You will put you down, because the training is that you find fault with things or elevate things that you value. So here's another way to look at that. Interesting, I noticed that. I never noticed it before. My goodness. I wonder why other people do those things. Could it be that if I do them, there's that same vulnerability in me where I am trying to either educate myself as a learning process, finding meaning within, or I am trying to preserve my image by saying, I don't do that, or I don't do it in the same way, therefore it's not the same thing. Any of that is okay. However, if you look at it from a point of view that all of us do much of the same things in a different way, for different reasons, different contexts, then we can learn about ourselves and perhaps even allow ourselves to hesitate and soften down with practice some of the stuff that we do reflexively, habitually, just to be okay within ourselves, not devaluing necessarily others or ourselves, but saying, oh my gosh, they do that because they're very vulnerable, or they do that because they're really happy. Wow. Someone said to me one time, I have a very hard time with people being happy because I know all life is not happy. I said, have you ever been happy? And they said, well, yeah, but not all the time. And what would happen if you were happy all the time? I wouldn't trust me. This is what they said. To me, and I may be wrong in this, it would be very frustrating to be always unhappy. But chances are a good aspect of your habitual training has been in that department. And as an adult, we attempt to broaden that out a bit so that we're not as harsh with ourselves as we've been trained to be. It's very difficult to do. Well, one could say, you could be talking to me and say, yeah, but Ron, I don't find it difficult to do. Well, that doesn't elevate you, but you may feel elevated for it. But if you don't find it difficult to do, great. Then don't be harsh with other people in a manner that you believe is okay because they deserve it, or that you don't notice. Oh, how can you not be harsh with people if you don't notice you're being harsh with people? So, different levels of consciousness, or subtlety, or generosity, or love occurs in each and every one of us all the time, frequently. So wonderfully interesting. In the meantime, there's another aspect here. It's very interesting. When Sri Aurobindo talks about different planes of consciousness, He's also talking about planes where people, for example, may be able to leave their body and engage in an astral form. The problem is with that is you bring yourself into that astral form and you engage the same way in the astral as you do in the physical. That's in the lower levels of the astral form. And this is a bit of a difficulty because if you feel important because you can do such things, you will feel important and you'll have ways to think that value you as superior to others because you can do something. And you haven't learned how to help others yet. You've learned how to help them individually if you believe they need the help that you can give them. But you may or may not judge them if they are growing on these planes, because you can see these planes fairly well in the lower astral forms, but you still assess based on how you are here. This is a subject matter that Aurobindo had an inclination to talk about from time to time, and very generally because it was very difficult, he knew, for people listening to him to understand what he was talking about under those conditions. He also talked about higher states moving in and engaging with these states that are focused on a personality basis as an obligation almost to protect the identity of individuals, to engage with levels that related all towards the physical profile, basically, emotionally and mentally, of an individual's personality. And he called that Prakriti. Well, he didn't call it only that. It was called that in the Upanishads, which he wrote quite a bit about, because he happened to be able to dip into higher states than the personalized forms, including the personalized forms, of course, as everyone else is very capable of being. In those orientations, he also talked about levels higher than Prakriti. And I'm searching for that name right now in my mind. And my memory is Purusha. Sorry, that's what it was. And if you read his versioning, once you move into a different state, it doesn't diminish the personality, but it makes the personality versionings less consequential in relationship to a synthesis with the higher state. Meaning, at a higher personalized state, very, very less focused on the person's individual rightness, wrongness, goodness, badness. At that level, there is a strong watchfulness about those energies that can flow through an individual for the purpose of helping them to fuse deeper and synthesize deeper into those higher states. We don't necessarily talk that way in the West because our focus is usually labeled and highly personalized, and therefore you have to be recognized as some higher being of some such. And in a deeper level, the individuality itself is becomes not interested in being recognized and is more apt to be very private about its growing process. But the emanations coming deep from deep in that level of higher states through the personalizations, through those chakras, flowing outwardly in and around the being, prepares that being, personalized being, to be able to be a helper. The personality is then used as a tool to be helpful in the growth of others. Personality goes through various levels of letting go of the need to be idealized in some way because they can be of help. So often you wouldn't know such a person on the street if you passed them. For two reasons. Number one, they would never let you know that they were helping, and they would only help if you were ready to be helped in a particular way to move towards something similar to how they function. You see, they don't have even though we talk about hierarchies all the time, their versioning of that is they don't say they are higher than you. They would say they are helping you to be as able as they, and in some way understand deeper the relationship, that synthesizing and a fusion of flow occurs in relationship to those so-called chakras, valves. They're really basically very much akin to valves. A valve is something like you turn a tap on really extremely a lot and or very soft and gentle. Ours is like this, really strong, our version of what we think things should be. And theirs is soft and gentle. So it's a bit movement in our comprehension to shift idealized positionings and versions of what things are like and not like. And I think it'll be a while before we can understand that, because our experience is what we count on to engage with and understand deeper than we have originally allowed ourselves to, because in all honesty, we have various ways of seeing things, and in our particular levels of interaction with each other, those ways are valued. So, and I've said this before, so if you're in a classroom in high school with me and you get an 82 and I get an 81, you're much smarter than I am, because everyone will tell you that. If you buy that icing, then you will want to be like that. Everything that comes out of your mouth will be valued by you more than anybody else. And there's often 50, 60 different answers to one single question, even more. Depends on the perspective. So you become flexible enough to allow other perspectives to be as valuable. Then you are learning how to be considerate of other ways to see how things function. It's very difficult to do because we grow through us, and that's kind of a semi-principle. We don't grow by memorizing stuff in this field, although, so help me, if you memorized 5,000 books on spirituality, you could give talks and make a lot of money. Oh, by the way, on any subject. But how it works inside of you is where the difficulty begins to function. You are engaging with you. You're not devaluing you or evaluating, elevating you. You're engaging with you and trying to understand you and trying to soften the emotional responses that you have about any change whatsoever that goes on internally. And you're trying to find a balance each and every time you grow to some degree. Devaluation is not helpful. Elevation is not helpful. But we do both of those things in trying to keep some sort of relevance to our personalized versions of how life is. And if we don't do that, it's very hard for us to engage with life because we have been trained to do exactly that. And we should do it until we don't as much. For the reason that it will help us to see us better. So that's a personalized seeing. You are watching you as you function and engaging with your meditations, your prayers, or your mantras, and trying to link up with states that are in our relative nature of existence. For example, others who have been here before are still vibrating in our relative species. And what I mean by that is their emotional disposition or mental disposition or physical disposition, if it reaches a different level of any kind, just beyond where the average is here, it will have an effect on those in the average or less, and also within their same reverential level of function. These are vibratory things. It's like listening to a bell ring. If you've ever struck a bell, a church bell or any other kind of a bell, they all have a tone, and it reverberates all around it. All of you are probably in high school have seen tuning forks with the key of G, and you have one way over in a corner, and you knock that one with a little metal mallet, and you put it down, and it rings. And soon you have the other one ringing over there in that corner. You didn't hit it. It's ringing because it's aligning with that tone, and that frequency is helping it. And we do the same with each other. And that occurs in relationship to others in tones, in certain frequencies. When we express ourselves, we're expressing literally in sound. That has an effect on us. We take in, we reject, we consider, we wonder, we forget, we walk away, but that tone is still vibrating. It's not because of what the person might have said. It's the engagement with the frequency that they're oscillating at, and it's usually a combination of frequencies. And those frequencies are oscillating in a way that may be helpful to a single aspect of a chakra and its energy moving through a single center or chakra or valve, moving into you, expressing itself in you relative to how you function in life. And you learn that there are coarser levels in that. If a person has hardly ever used that frequency in any other way than in a particular manner, they will have a little bit of a harder time shifting that tone because the habit moves back in through time. And yes, Michel Laramie had one. Can you use, for example, the life map to ask for help for your interspaces, past lives, past times, healing in that place? Yes, if you're sincere with it, that flow can operate back through time because you are a composite of times and it works within you. You are linked to those times. You're not separate from them. And at times, you will be acting like you did in other timelines. And other times, you'll say, oh, that's weird. I don't think I want to do that. And you will adjust, adapt, and do something different. Chances are each and every one of us have attempted to adapt from some way of acting from time to time in this lifetime, and we happen to notice it. Many we don't, but many we do. And that's fine. That's what we're doing, adapting to the tonal aspects of that particular frequency. Now, that doesn't only happen like on an instrument that we play, but it does happen in relationship to the instrument that we are. And we have these valves that each and every one of them, and there are many, are affected and express at different levels. There can be really wondrous levels still related to the personality orientation. That's the Prakriti aspect. Many different levels moving towards an engagement with Purusha or higher states. Lower, coarser states, higher states. Lower states focused on the personalizations of everything. And higher states getting less and less interested because you know that what you're doing is learning and watching the engagement with higher states operating through that person who is attempting to allow themselves to handle shifts and changes within them for a purpose beyond the personalization of itself. Interesting. Of course, one could say this is all a theory, and you'd be right, except if you could perceive that occurring, then it becomes less a theory. Now you have to be okay with allowing that to be less a theory, because the personality itself doesn't want to be considered less than anything. It's the nature of our coarser levels. Why would it ever want to be less than? It's important to be more than. But no, it's not true. There are many who are trained to be less than. Doesn't mean they are. Just means that's the training that they've tried to adapt their life to because of different kind of trainers. but it's difficult to move in both of those engagements. You can be really able and expressing a frequency that is difficult on these planes to handle. And that in itself would be horrendous on these planes. So there's much more. And I know we like to name things, and I haven't. I've talked to you about looking at the rays of frequencies that can operate through, but there are rules and regulations in relationship to those things. And therefore, if there are rules and regulations, you're going to come up with ideas that emphasize these rules and regulations so that they can be more right than other people's rules and regulations. It's a dilemma with us. So, varying frequencies do occur. And noticing doesn't have to be visual, it can be quite physical, it can be tonal, it can be spatial, all around you. That's a kind of internal orientation. Doesn't have very many rules attached to it. You might be able to grow experientially because your whole system is nothing but a sensor. Yeah, you take in information, send it up all the way up to your brain. Your brain tries to make sense of it to the best of its ability and shouts through um, some organs an expression of what it all means based on where it believes things must be made sense of on many, many levels in our world. And that's how we are. Neither good nor bad, right or wrong. Just that's how we are. And we will continue to be quite adamant until we see something different. And if you see something different, interesting. But it's not a thought process only, it's an awareness process. And that's a key thing. Hard to allow yourself to think of those things that way. But an awareness is a lot more difficult than it is to have thoughts projected verbally. And the only way we can engage with each other is by verbal expression. So we must continue to do the best we can. And I wish you all well. I think we're going to meditate right now. And we're going to give ourselves a little jolt, hopefully upward, or in a way, kind of bringing that energy in a little bit so we can fuse with it and try to find a balance again. I wish you all well. And thanks in advance for the questions you're going to send in for the seminar. I hope you've all registered. I don't look after that. Thanks to Marlene. She looks after it very, very well. And you take care. We'll talk soon.
Shivoham, Shivoham, Chidanandarupa, Shivoham, 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 Shivoham. Brahmamurarisuratchitalingam Nirmalbhasitashovitalingam Janmajadukhavinashakalingam Tatpranamami Sada Shivalingam Devamuni Pravarajjitalingam Kamadahana Karunakaralingam Ravanatharpavinashalingam Tatpranamami Sada Shivalingam Sarvasugandhisulepidalingam Buddhivivardhanakaranalingam Siddhisurasurvanditalingam Tatpranamami Sada Shivalingam Kanakamahamaniभूषितलिङ्गम् Faniपतिवेष्टितशोभितलिङ्गम् दक्षसुयत्नविनाशकलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् कुङ्कुमचन्दनलेपितलिङ्गम् पङ्कजहारसुशोभितलिङ्गम् सञ्चितपापविनाशकलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् देवगणार्चितसेवितलिङ्गम् भावेन भक्तिभिरेव दिनकरकोटिप्रभाकरलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् अष्टदलोपरिवेष्टितलिङ्गम् सर्वसमाद्भवकारणलिङ्गम् अष्टदरे त्रुटिनाशकलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् सुरगुरुसुरवरपूजितलिङ्गम् सुरवनपुष्पसदार्चितलिङ्गम् परमपदं परमात्मकलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम् तत्प्रणमामि सदा शिवलिङ्गम्
Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. And I wish you all well. Keep safe. Take care.